Hello there, this is Jane Miller. Welcome. Do you know that for more than 15 years I've been traveling around motivating, inspiring, and training, helping people understand why they're doing what they're doing and why they don't do many of the things they want to do. I've been doing this with my practice, the Miller Institute. Maybe you've seen or read The Secret, which featured Bob Proctor, who was my mentor. There've been about 200 or 300 million people who have seen that movie. The movie talks about the law of attraction, how we attract into our lives everything that comes into our lives. A lot of people, they say, I don't know about that. But, this whole universe operates by law. Dr. Wernher von Braun, who was the father of the space program, said that the natural laws of the universe are so precise that we don't have any difficulty building spaceships, sending people to the moon, and we can actually time the landing with the precision of a fraction of a second. I want to introduce you to some ideas here that were put together by Bob Proctor and facilitated by me that I think you're going to like. And if you really let yourself get into this stuff, it could change you and the bottom line of your company like night and day. When people in the company become more productive, the increase in profit goes right to the bottom line. Now think about that. All the expenses are looked after, the overhead's looked after, the individuals just raise the bar. They become more productive. That, of course, earns greater profit for the company, goes right to the bottom line. So, Life Success Productions, with whom I'm associated, has been involved in this kind of work for 41 years now. Over 41 years. They work all over the world. In fact, they work in about 47 different countries. And they've seen results that would actually shock the average individual. When I first began certifying for the program, I had difficulty believing it myself. And I can share those stories, but I'd rather tell you, and I'm sure you'd rather learn, how we can accomplish those results for you. Now, although we believe profit is the first order of business, because without profit, you're going to go out of business, we don't see that as the purpose of any human organization. We believe that the purpose of all human organizations is to make life more meaningful. The program that I'm about to explain to you is It's a program that's designed not only to increase profit, but to make life more meaningful for all the individuals in your company. And I want you to think about this for a second. Think of the number of times you've gone into a hotel and you booked a hotel, and think of all the people that work there that are serving you. If all those people left, if they were just taken out of the hotel, you wouldn't even have a hotel any longer. You just have brick and mortar edifice with a bunch of stuff in it. Well, it's the same with your company. You take all of the people out of your company, you don't have a company anymore. You just got buildings and things and systems that sit there. Nothing's really happening. You see, a company is really the people. When we start to really understand this, everything changes. If you know me, I've been on a 20-year hunt for success, and sure, I was very successful in my career as an electric utility account manager, but many of you have gone through the skills and leadership training that I conducted over the years, and how many times have I spoken at your Rotary Club? Still, while I found that skills and strategy are key, people and how they think, that's what's vital. When I began to really study this and understand it, that's when my desire and my hunt for excellence and success became easy. 50 years ago, Bob Proctor was in a bad place. He was 26 years old, had a very bad track record, had a bad attitude. He had never really accomplished anything of any consequence. In fact, he left school after a couple of months of high school, ended up working in factories and bars, was in the Navy for a couple of years. He was sitting in a fire hall one day when a gentleman introduced him to a book. He said, Bob, if you follow the instructions in this book, you can have virtually anything you seriously want. Well, of course, Bob didn't believe that. You see, at the time he was really unhappy, he was sick, and he was broke. With no formal education, no business experience, he had all the reasons down pat as to why he was getting a bad deal in life and never took responsibility for any of it. It was always someone or something else. The man said, listen, if you're going to change your world, you've got to change yourself. He quoted Huxley, the great English writer. He said, there's only one corner of the universe that you can change, and that's your own self. And he got Bob to study this book. Well, everything in life seemed to change overnight for him. His income went from $4,000 a year to about $175,000, and then over $1 million. He started cleaning offices on the side, and in less than 5 years, his company was cleaning offices in Toronto, Montreal, Boston, Cleveland, even England. This just kept growing, and people would say, Bob, what are you doing? And he'd say, I don't know, I'm just reading this book. You see, he was doing a couple of things that were very unreal, totally illogical. He was reading the same book over and over and over and over again. As a matter of fact, Bob is still reading that book. That was in 1961, the year I was born. Now, in retrospect, what Bob was doing was literally changing his life, but he didn't know why he was changing. One day he made up his mind he was going to figure it out, so, no one could tell him really what had happened. He thought it was because he was reading the book, and then he listened to some recordings of the book, but Bob says he gave the book to other people and nothing happened. He shared his records with other people and nothing happened. It took him about 9 years to figure it out. It was the repetition of the ideas that literally reprogrammed his mind. You see, you and I are programmed with an understanding or not. We're programmed genetically and environmentally. Now, when Bob put this together, he decided to teach it. He put it in a very organized and coherent manner and began teaching it to companies. Prudential of America was one of the first companies he went into way back in the early 70s. Their production went up by hundreds of millions of dollars. It's all on record, hundreds of millions of dollars. The top people in the company were shocked. They were sending psychologists in to find out what they were doing. Well, what they were really doing was just learning, and the people were learning to do what they already knew how to do. You see, one of the things we know is how to do a better job, but we're not doing it. These same concepts have helped tens of thousands of people for many, many years, and Life Success Productions has now updated and put together a new program together, and it's called Thinking into Results. I wanted to share all the history with you so that you could grasp the possibilities of this all. Thinking is the highest function that you and I are capable of. All the great leaders throughout history have been in complete and unanimous agreement on that point. You and I become what we think about. Well, there are a lot of people who would disagree with that, but the wise ones were in complete and unanimous agreement, although they might have disagreed with almost everything else. Earl Nightingale, one of the first radio broadcasters to share these concepts, once said that if the average person said what they were thinking about, they would be speechless. I remember laughing when I first read that, and I thought, well, everyone thinks, but the truth is that very few people think. Start listening to conversations going around you, and you realize people are just not thinking, or they'd never say what they're saying. Stand back, watch, and listen. So rather than spending a lot of time talking about the power of this program, let me mention that this program gets results, and they're permanent results. I know you've been involved in programs in the past where you'd see a little blip on the radar screen, but then the results would go back to where they were, no great change. And I'm talking here about a quantum leap in results. I'm talking about results that you'd have difficulty buying into, and that people already know how to do this. So I'm going to ask you to sit back and relax for about 20 minutes as I explain some of the things that I've learned while working with Bob Proctor, and talk about his experiences over the past 50 years that they've been sharing with companies all over the world. This program is the best I've ever seen. This program works. there they are. And again, it's written that Bob's wisdom came through a lineage of great teachers, beginning with Andrew Carnegie, there to the right, who passed it on to Napoleon Hill, and Napoleon Hill passed it on to Earl Nightingale, who you see there. And then Bob Proctor worked with Earl Nightingale. Bob passed this on to his facilitators, including me, and I am honored to pass it on. There was a man by the name of Lincoln, and he was the president of Lincoln Electrical at one time, so that's my bailiwick, electrical, right? But he said, companies have historically left their greatest resource greatly untapped. That resource is intelligence, the initiative, the productive power latent in every individual. I'm inclined to agree with him. We get so busy with things that we're doing and projects that we're working on and systems that we're installing, we forget about the people. We forget that the greatest scientist alive will not even guess what your lower producer is capable of doing. There's genius locked up in everyone, and we've got deep reservoirs of talent and ability within us, and we've left it lying dormant. Really, our educational system doesn't even bring it to the surface, as you will see. There are two things that people have to know if they're going to win. And you look at this, you'll say, well, that's pretty obvious. They have to know where they are and have to know where they're going. And when things aren't happening the way we want, the first place we should look at are the results. You see, it's so simple, so obvious. But why are there so many people stuck? You know, they take a look at the results and they keep getting the same results. You know, if you have somebody who comes into work late, they probably do it frequently. Another person who shows up early, they probably do it frequently. And we say, I know where the problem is. They have no goals. They have no direction. They have no reason to grow. But we found that that's not really true. They may not have goals in writing, and they may not be too articulate, but everybody wants something. Everybody wants something. That comes from the essence of who we are. We want to express ourselves in a greater way. Now, we found that the problem lies in where they are, and I'm not talking geographically. I'm talking about mentally. They really don't know where they are mentally. And you know, I could go back to Bob Proctor, who really introduced me to this, and he said, Jane, who are you? And I looked at him thinking it was a silly question. I said, well, I'm Jane. He said, you're not Jane. Jane is your name. He said, Jane and Miller are just two words. It's your name, but it's not you. And I said, well, this is me. And I kind of pointed to my body, and no, he said, that's not you either. He said, did you ever phone into work and say, body is not coming in today, it's sick? No. Have you ever heard anyone say, M hand, M leg? Of course not. We say, my hand, my leg. You see, we can go all the way through the educational system and learn very little about who we are. We're all programmed. We're all programmed genetically and environmentally, and it's paradigms. Paradigms literally control our lives. Paradigms, for the most part, are like red lights. It causes people to reach a certain level and stop. We know how to do better, but we stop. We are going to turn it into a green light because we're going to see and show why people stop, and then how to turn the green light and get going. John Ruskin put it very well. He condensed what I said in just a few words here. He said, education does not mean teaching people what they do not know. Education is teaching people to behave as they do not behave. Think about this for a moment. You know, when I was a little kid, my mom would say, "Why did you do that?" And I would say, "I don't know." She'd say, "What do you mean you don't know? You know better." "I know." "Well, then why are you doing it?" "I don't know." When I was in school, my teachers and coaches, they'd say, "Jane, why are you doing that?" "I don't know." And they'd say, "You know better." "I know." "Well, why are you doing it?" "I don't know." I want you to think of some of the people in your company, and you've taught them how to do something, right? Maybe over and over, and retrained, but they're not doing it. And you see them continually make the same mistakes. So why are they doing that? They really don't know, and they don't even know that they don't know. As we get into this, things are really going to start to move for you here. Paradigms shape our logic. A paradigm is a fixed concept in our mind. It's our fixed belief system. You see, at one time, you know and I know that everybody believed the world was flat. And that was logical, right? I mean, how could you live on the side, forget the bottom? Yeah, it was an accepted fact that planes could not fly. Planes have always been able to fly. It's just that the Wright brothers became aware of how to make it happen. They stepped out of the box. They started to think illogically. And then our logic controls our perception. Our perception is our point of view. Our perception is our reality. Well, you're going to find that thinking into results as a program is laid out in such a way that it helps people alter the logic by creating a greater awareness and changing perceptions. Our paradigms, they literally control how we utilize our time. Hey, everybody gets the same amount of time. We get all that there is. Well, why is it that some people produce? They're so much more productive in a given period than others. We know that some people will accomplish more in a month than other people will do in an entire year. And I could honestly tell you, I accomplish more now in a week, in any given week, that I used to accomplish an entire year. In a matter of months, I accomplished more than I did in my first 35 years. How did that happen? I changed my paradigm. The paradigm controls our effectiveness. It controls our productivity. And get this, something everybody wants to change. They all want to learn about how to earn more money, right? Well, our ability to earn money is controlled by our paradigm. You see, a person earning $50,000 a year is not automatically going to think of how to earn $50,000 a month. No, they're programmed to think of how to earn $50,000 a year. So paradigms are really a big deal. Now, we have to ask, what are paradigms? Paradigms are really a multitude of habits, but this is the interesting part. They're other people's habits that have been passed down from one generation to the next. You see, we inherited almost all of our belief systems, and we didn't originate them ourselves. Culture is nothing but group habit. That's a paradigm. We move into a different culture, and we say they're different. No, they just appear to be different. A corporation has a culture too. They have, paradigms, and as the paradigm, though, of the corporation shifts, guess what? The whole company changes. Now the mind is the greatest power in all of creation. I think we know that. When we're talking about paradigms, we're really talking about the mind. What does your mind look like? You see, that's a question that no one can answer because no one has ever seen the mind. We've never seen it. Now, when you think about the mind, something happens. We become very confused. That's really what happens. Without the image, we have confusion. However, out becomes order. It's just a higher degree of order than that which existed prior to the confusion. So yes, a higher degree of order than which existed prior to the confusion. You could say I'm actually a bit of an oddball because I started to study things that the average people probably would never study. I have shelves of books, and you'll always find me carrying books around in my car or my purse, and I'm always going off to seminars, as you might know. And I'd heard about Dr. Thurman Fleet. Okay, he's a doctor from California who was very involved in the holistic movement, the healing arts at that time. And he wasn't satisfied with the progress. He concluded that the mind is an activity, not a thing, right? He observed that, in the medical field, we were treating symptoms, not treating the cause of the problem. So he had said that if there was going to be any good health, you had to heal the whole person. Well, you can go back as far as Hippocrates, and they were talking about holistic health at the time. If there's something wrong with the physical body and you treat the physical body, you're treating a symptom. So it's like taking an aspirin for a headache. You're not treating the cause of the headache, you're treating the headache. So Dr. Thurman Fleet noted that if we were going to treat the whole person, we're going to have a picture of the mind. And since nobody ever has seen the mind, then he would go ahead and make a picture of the mind. He would go ahead and eliminate confusion. This little drawing that you're going to look at next may cause you to smile because I certainly did when I first saw it. I've come to believe, though, that this is the most valuable lesson I've learned. It gives me an image of the mind and eliminates my confusion. So now when I think of the mind, I have order in my mind. So the top half of the mind, top half of the large circle that you're seeing here, it's called the conscious mind. And the bottom half is the subconscious mind. And then the body, down below, is the instrument of the mind. So as you watch a person's body move or do the things that it does, what you're really doing is seeing the expression of the activity that's going on in the mind. So if they raise their hand, guess where it came from? Right. If they're walking on by, guess where that came from? Right. Now, let's take this and apply it as we have to thinking into results. Now, dealing with symptoms. Results are symptoms. Balance sheets are symptoms. Income is a symptom. Relationships are symptoms. Now, what are the cause of the symptoms? We've got all kinds of behavioral scientists who treat behavior, but they won't change the results. You can say that behavior causes results, but yes, but it's a secondary cause. You have to go back to the primary cause. Now stay with me here. And let's take a look at this from the point of view of this program, Thinking into Results. So the conscious mind is the thinking mind. It's also called the educated mind. This is the part of our personality that we refer to as the intellect, okay? Now, the bottom half of the big circle is the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is the emotional mind. Really, the two parts operate quite differently. Let's take a look at something else about the conscious mind. Your conscious mind has the ability to choose. You see, there's a power flowing to and through us that, and as this power flows into our consciousness, we have the ability to choose. Choose what? We can think anything we want to think. Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, he was a Viennese psychiatrist, but he spent the war years in a concentration camp. You might have read about him. I don't suppose anyone was subjected to more physical and intellectual abuse than he and his peers, but yet he spoke about one of the last of human freedoms. He said, no one can cause us to think something we don't want to think. We have the ability to choose. So remember, The conscious mind has the ability to accept or reject. You can accept what I'm saying, or you can reject it. I'm suggesting that you do neither, that you first evaluate it, that you really think about it. Don't accept it. Don't reject it. Think about it. Really evaluate it, and then think to yourself, if we install these ideas in the company, if I was to take and just invest a few more dollars in each employee each week over the next year, what would happen? Well, I'm going to tell you that the results would absolutely shock you, because you're going to show people how to accept the good ideas and how to reject the bad. The conscious mind is part of the mind where we originate ideas. This is where creation starts in my life for me. I originate the ideas. There's a power within that executes it. So again, you see, the subconscious mind, it must accept it. It has no ability to reject. It doesn't have the ability that I just talked about. It has to accept. It has no ability to reject. Here's an important point. The subconscious mind can't differentiate between what's real and what's imagined. Now that's huge. You see, if we start to get emotionally involved in an idea, which is what Wernher von Braun did, you think about this. Taking a man to the moon. When John Kennedy asked Dr. Wernher von Braun what it would take to carry a man, or to build a rocket ship to carry a man to the moon and bring him back safely to Earth, his response was simple: the will to do it. Remember that word, will. The will to do it. The will is a mental faculty that we're going to talk about. It's a very powerful part of our personality. Again, the subconscious mind must accept whatever you give it. Your company is really not just the manifestation of an idea that someone was involved with. So now, I think about the heavy hitters, the achievers. I'm talking about the big producers. They operate differently. You know, they're directed by something from inside. Go to the closet, they close the door, they go to their sanctum, they go to the inner quiet voice from within. But they've been trained and programmed, and I'm talking about all of us, all of the masses now, who we live through our senses. You know, there's maybe 3% who operate differently, but most of us operate the way we're describing here. We get something through to the conscious mind, and we let it just trickle right down to our subconscious mind without even thinking about accepting or rejecting it. So, you see, information comes from the outside. Remember in one of the previous graphics, I pointed out the conscious mind was also the intellectual mind. You know, Napoleon Hill pointed out in his work, and keep in mind he studied with 500 of the most successful people, and he did research his entire life. You know, he wrote the laws of achievement and then Think and Grow Rich. He said an educated person is not necessarily a person with an abundance of general or specialized knowledge. An educated person is one who has so developed the faculties of their mind that they can acquire anything that they want, or its equivalent, without violating the rights of others. So create the image. Get emotionally involved with the image. And this will be your result, because the body acts on the idea. Okay, let's look at these next two drawings. Now, this is going to represent the same person. The one on the left represents you now, and the one on the right represents you when you were an infant, when you first arrived on the planet. Now, there's a difference. We're going to have to change the picture. You see, when you first arrived, you had no conscious mind. So we've got to just take it and eliminate it. There it goes. You see, the subconscious mind was wide open. It must accept anything you give to it. You see, it doesn't have the ability to accept or reject. It must accept. So whatever was going on around you at the time, when you were a baby, all the ideas, the thoughts, the images that were going around went right into the baby's mind, right? So that's you, it's me, Uncle Harry, Aunt Betty, who works at the next desk, right? It's Joe, the salesperson, or Jeannie, the salesperson. Our mind is programmed. So again, think of how things, just as we were as a baby, when ideas, thoughts, and images flowed directly into our subconscious minds. That's what we're doing now. We're just letting them all come in, aren't we? Right? Watch this. Directly into the subconscious mind. You have people in your company who have very strong image, right? They know they can do certain things. And then there's others who are a little sheepish, quiet, maybe withdrawn, and they don't think they can do very much. Why is that? It's been established that a child with who's gotten lots of praise when they were growing up becomes very confident, and a child who's been raised with a lot of criticism is very insecure when they grow up. Now, again, is that our paradigm? Yes. If you take a look at the drawing on the left side of the screen, that's you now. You have in your subconscious mind what's called paradigm. Paradigm is a multitude of habits. They've been fixed there, and they were fixed there before you even had the ability to think. But we can change the scene, right? Here's the child. Here's the paradigm. You can think of yourself, or you can think of somebody else, and as they reach the age of reason, this is when the conscious faculties begin to develop, right? And things start happening, right? The conscious mind is developing, and the paradigm is there. Now, you see these little sensory factors that come upon. They're like little antennae. Well, those are our senses, right? We can see, hear, smell, taste, touch. Now, here's what you want to do. You see the paradigm? This person has been programmed from birth to go by what they see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. So all of their direction comes from the outside world. All of it. So you see the information is coming from the outside. And again, remember in the previous, one of the graphics I showed you that the conscious mind was also the intellectual mind? And again, remembering what Napoleon said, Hill said, that an educated person is not necessarily the person with the abundance of general or specialized knowledge, but it's the one who has so developed the faculties of their minds that they can acquire anything they want, or its equivalent, without violating the results of others. Now, I want to ask you a question that was asked of, about 200 educators by Bob, probably a good 15 years ago. What are the intellectual factors? He couldn't get one person to tell what they were. Can you answer that question? You don't have to tell me, just acknowledge to yourself, We have perception. That was the will that von Braun was talking about. About imagination and memory and intuition and reason, the will to do something. Imagination. Oh, memory. Now, do you know that we have a perfect memory? We have a perfect imagination, and we have that perfect reasoning factor. Let's go back. Have you ever heard or said to yourself that you have a bad memory? There is no such thing. It's simply your memory. It's not good or bad. And I asked Bob one time, well, how long do you remember something? And he said, until I forget it. There's no such thing as a bad memory. Really nothing complicated about it. You just have to learn how to use your memory. When we talk about perception, and perception is really our point of view. Two people can look at the same thing and see something totally different. Grew up with 5 brothers, and between my 5 brothers and my father, there was a lot of different perceptions going on there. You see, as you raise your level of conscious awareness, your perception of things will change, and As you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Get that again. As you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And we've got these phenomenal faculties. Imagination. We're discouraged from using it at a very early age when we start school. They say you're not paying attention and you're punished. Why do we have large organizations and very small creative departments? As some of you might know my work that I've done with attention deficit disorders and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. My daughter was labeled ADD. Thank goodness! Today she designs structurally sound and graphically pleasing distribution packaging for a major candy distributor. Thank goodness she has the imagination and the will. Well, what we have to understand is, even with all the faculties of the mind, the perception, will, imagination, memory, intuition, and reason, the way to change the paradigm, to get it out of the way, we're going to have to change and begin to use our subconscious mind the way it was meant to be used, through the aid of all of those intellectual factors, right? The faculties of the mind. That's what this whole program does. It shows people just how to use what they've already got, right? We got so much technology today. We've got the smartphones, and we've got the television and computers and space travel. That's why we have it. That's why I can touch a little phone that I carry in my pocket and send a message to 100 people at the same time. As soon as I touch send, it simultaneously sends the message to all these places at all the same time. Where did that come from? It was always here. We just weren't aware of how to do it. The way to fly airplanes was always here, and the Wright brothers found out how to do it. Well, the way to raise productivity in our companies is already here. Listen for a moment. You and I have the ability to think, to create an image. We can impress that image upon the subjective mind, and then we'll act on it. And then we change the result. We create the image, we get emotionally involved with the image, it acts on the idea and becomes the result. You see that? We all have the ability to create and think about and create an image. And what we need to learn to do is press it upon our subconscious mind. I want you to stop and think of what might happen if everyone in your company really understood this. Really understood it. I'll tell you one thing that would happen. They'd have a lot more fun. They wouldn't work anywhere near as hard, but they'd produce much better results. There'd be more cohesiveness, and there'd be more team effort. They would be involved in a creative adventure, not just work. Competition would be set aside. Cooperation would be the rule. That's what we really want to do. That's what we want to do with you. There are only two known ways to change the paradigm. One is an emotional impact. Very rarely that happens in a positive direction, although it could. An emotional impact may be when a person loses a loved one, and boom, like that, their life changes, right? When you go to the doctor and he gives you some bad news, boom, your life changes. The other way, though, is through the repetition of an idea. This is what I'd done. It was the repetition of the ideas. So here I am. I have a load of books on the shelves, and they're all great. But what I started to do was started to read and study the same book that Bob Proctor did, right? I listened to the same recordings that Bob Proctor did, that Napoleon Hill did, that Earl Nightingale did, that Andrew Carnegie did, and I began to change my paradigms. I was substituting the ideas I'd been raised with, and genetically and environmentally, with the ideas, again, that Nightingale recorded and Napoleon Hill wrote. Now, A lot of you know my background was from working in electric utilities in the regulated years. Talk about paradigms. Wow. But we can change our paradigms. And it's what we have to do to get the new results that we're looking for. You know, if there's opposing ideas in your paradigms, they're not going to change but through repetition over and over and over and over again until it begins to change. You know, when we go into a company, we recommend that everyone do the program. It's a personal thing. It's not a corporate thing, it's a personal thing. Just a quick go through about how repetition works when we're changing our paradigms. Now, take a look at this. The white line above, that represents the sound of, let's say, a CD playing or a music playing. Here it comes. And remember when I said the paradigm controls the logic? I'm going to suggest you do something that is totally illogical, right? But when you do it over a short period of time, you'll be shocked at the results. Because it's illogical, not many people do it, and I'm asking you to do it. So let's look at this. So then let the red line represent you listening to the CD or the sound of the CD playing. Now, here's an important point. We hear with our ears, but we listen with our emotions. So the subconscious, again, is the emotional mind. That's where the paradigm is. So you go along and you're listening, and boop, an idea hits your mind, and off you go on a thought trip, right? Now what you really do is you move to a different frequency. The sound is still playing, but emotionally you're not listening to it. You're up there at a higher frequency and you're thinking about the idea that struck your mind. And then you stop thinking about that idea and you get your mind back to listening, right? But just for a short period of time, because bang, you're going along and then another idea hits your mind. And then it happens again. These ideas hit and you go off on another thought trip. But the sound is still playing, the white line, the CD, the sound is still going on. You hear it, but you're not listening. You know, and then you go down and you start listening again. And on it goes. Now, you've only thought about the idea once, right? But again, if there's an opposing idea in your paradigm, it's not going to change except through repetition over and over again. Look at this for a moment again. Remember we talked about your little life and the repetition of ideas, and how many times do you think your mom or dad had to tell you your name before you started to respond, right? I'm imagining for me it was like J, 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 J. And after a while, I would hear Janie, and I was starting to come around. They must be talking about me. See? But it was the repetition. You know, if they had said, listen, I'm going to tell you something, dear, and I don't want you to ever forget it. Your name is Janie. We don't do that, right? We need repetition. Well, that's what this program is about. And it's been 50 years in the making. You know, if you know me well, you know my energetic and magnetic style, and I just love to present to you. But I'm backed by two of these wonderful top intellects, Sandy Gallagher, who's a top corporate executive, and Bob Proctor, who's been teaching these programs, and he teaches it actually in the recordings in the program. You know, Bob's been playing with this information since I was born, since 1961. He can tell you stories from all over the world. You know, he and Sandy Gallagher, they've worked all over the world. It's really shocking, but, you know, we ought to really sit down and talk about you and talk about what we can do in your company, not what Bob and Sandy has done at Acme Chemical or Prudential of America. I'd like to talk to you about your company, you know, and your people. We can dig into the specifics, and really you're going to be quite pleased because this gets results, and the results really are going to shock you. You know, I've been studying this and doing this for about 18 years now, and I think it's obvious to you that I love it. I absolutely love it. This program works. I think it's an absolute shame that most people go from cradle to casket and they never find out who they are. Our educational system doesn't teach them how to think about that information. You kind of have to go on it on your own. So here's your chance. Now, I want you to forget about everything you've learned before. And let Miller Institute come in and talk to you. And just like that, you'll change. This is Jane Miller, and I thank you.